Okay, a pleasant good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for being here with us this morning. The person I am about to introduce is a phenomenal colleague of mine, one who is well known for her work in several of her capacities and has served as AdLib chair for many years. Today, she will be talking to us about online instructional practices. This session will present to us effective strategies for online teaching and also will promote reflection of practices and development of our community of learners. Ladies and gentlemen, she mentions that online pedagogy requires multiple instructional strategies, moving away from the transitional teacher-centered classroom to an active, dynamic, collaborative, and contextual environment where the students are no longer dependent solely on faculty knowledge, but have access to vast resources of data. Given these pandemic times we're all going through in one way or another, all of us have had to transcend into what we consider the new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, I leave you in the capable hands of my colleague and good friend, Dr. Sharmayne Saunders. You may proceed.
Thank you, Hugo. Can you tell me if you can see my screen with the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you from a practitioner standpoint online education. I joined the University of the West Indies sometime in 2008 after almost 12 years of working. I feel compelled to serve my country and to offer the technical standpoint from a first-hand experience of working online. Now, prior to joining the University of the West Indies, I served a couple years with blended modality because the University of the West Indies Open Campus, the main focus of delivery was distance education. And then we slowly evolved into online education. And I think somewhere around 2009, 2010, we were completely offering online education. All our degree programs are presented using an online platform. And throughout those years, I've remained very close to the delivery of courses. I'm always at the back end, and I felt that this information is necessary to share with my colleagues, particularly in higher education in Belize, because at this point we really have no choice but to deliver and to ensure that our stakeholders receive the quality education that they should be getting using whatever modality we've selected. So I start off my presentation from a point of knowledge, and one of the things that makes me remain very true to my own self is that I recognize that I don't know everything and I'm a lifelong learner. And so even though we only have a limited amount of time for this delivery, I will try my best to make it as interactive as possible, and I will stop at intervals to ask for your contribution, because I believe that we learn from each other, and it's only through this type of community of practice that we develop, we can move forward as an institution. So a little bit about this session. The focus of this session is really to present to you some strategies that can be utilized for effective online teaching and for instruction. Now, in no way do I consider myself the all-out expert, but for the country of Belize, I recognize that the session has to be reflective of how we are operating at this point in time. And there have been many opportunities as an institution for us to share with each other how we can make this situation a learning situation for all of our institutions. So you will notice that the session also promotes reflection of practice. And yes, maybe from my standpoint, but also I want to encourage you to use the mechanism here, the chat and all that, to share from your reflection of practice for the period that you have been doing this as well. So as a result of that, I believe that we can begin to develop a community of learners. So a little bit about our situation in Belize, and I have had several opportunities to deliver recommendations to not only the government, but also I've done some public lectures and public presentation and recovery strategy for the education sector. And so I thought the introductory part of this would be for me to share what I presented or what I collated for those presentations. Our educational institutions, in particular, I speak about higher education institutions here in Belize, we were forced to operate in crisis response migration methods. And that method was particularly directed at distance learning or online learning. And I use them interchangeably, knowing fully well that and you will see as I go along with my presentation that everybody was not able to deliver online. So there were some strategies that were infused in the online platform that allowed for us to give access to learning to all students, both in the urban and rural. So we had an unplanned and rapid transition. None of us could deny that. We were thrust into this modality. And I think for the most part, Galen University and UWI were the only two universities that had advanced knowledge of how to do this. The other institutions, we quickly jumped from where we were and we were plunged into this new method. It was a crisis response method. And so we had to do quick training. I personally did a lot of the training for the tertiary institutions, the introductory for the teachers, trying to help them to make this transition a little bit easier and a little less stressful on their part. But we had situations with bandwidth. We had a significant gap in number of devices. And not only did we recognize that the students did not have the devices, but there were also our instructors who did not have up-to-date devices or devices that they were able to transition into this online modality. Not to add, it was compounded by the fact that our administrators, teachers, and students had very little preparation, but we moved forward. So this gave rise to the distinctive e-learning strategy. And in most part, we found ourselves ensuring that students also had to do self-directed learning. And this is not unique. When we look backward, we also saw that the secondary schools and primary schools were also faced with similar challenges. And a lot of our tertiary institutions are teacher education providers. So what we did in that platform also impacted the secondary and the primary levels. So there were some areas of concern. Of course, the technological devices, what was necessary, what was needed. And the government played a crucial role in trying to help to identify who would get technological devices in the schools. There was also strong suggestions because of the internet costs and access and who would bear the cost of getting online. The cost prohibitive nature of data access in Belize, and this, when we looked at it, both urban and rural, was causing great concerns for us in the education sector. Students, as well as teachers, lack familiarity and capacity for online education. And then we had the struggle, of course, with teachers' use of technology. While many teachers were familiar with some programs and some platforms, they were never asked to deliver online education, and now they were forced to do that. So what was the education sector's response? Well, the first thing you do when you're thrust with a crisis, or a crisis is you're in the middle of a crisis, is to train, train, train. And so the education sector focused on development of teachers, professional development, but this during the time when we were on severe country lockdown was a challenge as well, because it required trying to train teachers, not in a face-to-face modality, but also online, which was the main reason they were to be trained. So that in itself was a challenge. Across the country, we have access, and I say free, but you know, in life, nothing is truly free. We had the access to Google Classroom and Google Teams brought to us by the government of Belize. I believe they pay for the packages, and so most institutions opted to use that because it did not come with a significant cost to the institution. And then the education, the government also looked at a planned phase approach to return to school, and that never materialized. So much money was invested in ensuring that we had proper PPE equipment, hand wash stations. There was a major investment in infrastructure at the institution, but the students never returned to the classroom. So there had to be an indirect reaction, and we found ourselves developing learning continuity packages because we had to address students who had zero access to internet, parents who had lost their jobs, could not afford to pay for data. That was not their priority. It was looking at food and sustaining their families. So we had to look at these packages where the school bore the cost of making copies initially and then distributing those packages at set time in line with the curfew of the country for students to continue to learn from home. And then there were some institutions that preferred the blended, or what I call the hybrid format, where teachers were expected to do some some online lectures, and then the students did offline assignments and self-directed learning. One suggestion that had been put forward was really to look at cohorts, and that was to match with the required number of persons together. And the gathering would have determined how many students would go into the classroom for face-to-face sessions, and for what duration and what days. And that whole plan evolved because our numbers of COVID cases had significantly increased, and so we had to move away from that strategy. And amongst all of this, we changed government in November. We had elections and government change, and to match that, we had a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases. So these recommendations also required some considerations for our internal policies and learning procedures and policies. A lot of institutions who reach out to me for for consultation on these processes, I kept insisting that they had to develop or revise their learning policies and procedures. And I also indicated to most institutions that this would be a dynamic document, because I don't think any country or any one institution had the answers, because we did not know. We were operating in uncertain times. So there was no way we could really say for definitively that whatever policy or practice we implemented would live on. So we had to constantly revise and update and ensure that we had our practices and procedures in line. So then we also had to revisit teacher training and exposure. Now, that process in itself, we have in our country, teacher education has its own separate umbrella, and we have a national policy, a national curriculum for teacher education up to for them to teach up to primary and secondary schools. There is some leverage at secondary schools, however, they do have to have subject matters. So again, the impact of teacher training, because the delivery comes from tertiary, we also had to look at policies for those and how we match that. And then the hybrid model of education was crucial in this recommendation, because definitely we knew that we had constraints that were unique to our country. We knew that there were huge disparities between urban and rural, and then we knew that within the classroom, no matter even if you were in urban or rural, we had children who had access to income to ensure they have computer, data, and all that, and then there were others who didn't. So there were disparities, and those had to be reflected in whatever model we decided to ensure that all students receive the same education and the same quality of education, despite the modality that we selected. So we ended up with mixed modality, a mixture, and some teachers use their creativity. And in all of this, there was the elimination of face-to-face, because that was controlled by the statutory instruments of the country. And so I move now to online and distance, online and in the classroom. And I will take a break for now and just want to ask those of you who are on the session if you would like to share what your experience was moving from a traditional pedagogical instructor to now having to deliver online. So I'll pause, and if someone would like to contribute.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Saunders.
Good morning.
First of all, I was educated through what is considered to be hybrid, both face-to-face and distance, via Galen and the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And it was a model that I've always loved. And I also love the environment. And when I think about all those handouts and so forth, and to train basically my students for real-life situations, for example, this pandemic, I've never given them a hard copy course outline. So it was like always dual for me. So the transition wasn't as rough or baptism by fire as some of our colleagues that were used to just a traditional face-to-face classroom. I think one of the biggest challenges that I face is that I think when people think about online, they often think that you're getting a free pass and it's not as easy, or it's easy and it's not as rigorous as a face-to-face. Because we have that perspective of what traditional classroom at the post-secondary level should be, and I think that to get your students and reach affected domains so that you can influence them to understand that it has the same severity and magnitude and even more, because along with a live session, they would then have to go out and do additionals. So that was my little experience with online and transitioning over so far.
Thank you, Angelique, and I'm so appreciative of that, because like you, my doctoral program, my master's and bachelor's I did face-to-face at Murray State, but my online PhD I did, it was fully online. And then later I did a lot of teaching online with both UWI and Galen. And in truth, I think there's a difference, but it helps in that you were a learner and then you're now transitioning to a lecturer, an online lecturer. And in truth, there is still that, for my university that is fully online, there is still that mixed feeling that Lisbeth, can you turn your mic off? Lisbeth Correa. Yes, there is still that mixed feeling that when you're online, you're not doing it with quality. It doesn't have the same quality. It's questionable. And so there is that extra, and people feel, indeed, you're right, they feel that it lacks rigor. I think we have a minute for another sharing if there's anybody else interested.
Good morning, colleague. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Mr. Coy here. One of the challenge that I've been facing in the delivery of my classes, or I am quite sure that other teachers really face this as well, is to, of course, try to, how would I put it this way, try to evaluate students, giving them a test, and then having difficulties in guiding them. Well, I'm not saying that most of them would like to cheat, but it's very challenging to supervise them. Most of the time, tests or quizzes will be given, and as you have mentioned earlier, they have access to almost everything.
Yes.
And it's quite challenging for me. I, of course, execute my tests and quizzes synchronously. However, there's still this challenging to supervise them, or to know whether they're applying what they have learned or cheating at the same time. That's my little contribution.
Esteban, and I want to give you some reassurance. Our university having pioneered distance education for over 70 years and online learning for well over a decade, we still struggle to find the right software, because there's a software there's so many software for exam and assessment. And we at this university, we still found ourselves struggling. Even though we were fully online, our students at the undergrad level still had to come face-to-face to do exam with invigilators in a timed environment. And now the university during COVID had agreed to do some changes to that structure. And we found ourselves changing that software because it wasn't working for us. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And I want to give you some reassurances that you're not in it alone. And I don't think that we've all had that down pat. I have a daughter who is now engaged in her first year of education, and they use a software with camera. They do it in camera. And even that, if she, when you bend down to write or type and the camera doesn't it catches your forehead, it becomes a question about if you're cheating. And so it is through our community of practice that we understand and appreciate that we're learning, and when we find the right software that can be utilized, then we will have an opportunity to share. But I don't know that any institution has all the answer, indeed. And I know that I can understand and I can relate to your struggle. And thank you for sharing. So some similarities and different. I'll work first with the similar. Sorry?
Can I share a little, please?
Yes, go right ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Adelia Young, and I'm a teacher of mathematics at the University of Belize. I've been teaching for over 30 years. And at first, it was a big struggle because of Will. We were thrown into it the last 5 weeks of last year semester.
Yes.
And so we had 10 weeks that we were face to face. So I knew my students, and I could have figured more or less the ones who would try to cheat and stuff. You know, we could have known that. But starting August, I don't know them. I haven't
Uh-huh.
seen them. Some of them have still not posted their photos. You know, it's it was kind of hard last semester to actually teach maths online. But this semester that we're in now, it makes it a little bit. It's less frightening, and you know, I feel I'm more confident now. I even want a job from somewhere else across the world to teach online mathematics. It's getting more interesting as it goes along.
Yes,
For the cheating part.
definitely.
Except, but I believe if I teach my students, if I teach them and they get to know the content, they are well confident in themselves, they won't want to cheat. So that's the avenue I use. I teach. I've been teaching for 30 odd years, and I don't want to boast, but I am sure my students they know that I teach them well.
Yes, and I think assessment and evaluation comes under a different strategy, a whole new arena we're talking about, but truly helpful for our discourse. But I think that there's definitely room for improvement and growth when we look at assessment and how we assess students' learning using the online modality. And even that requires a redefined view from our teachers on how they perceive the assessment of knowledge of students. Because in the online environment, you're right. I think Mr. Esteban pointed it out rightly so. The students have a lot of resources. And so we find that now teachers are now looking at what we used to do in our traditional pedagogical practice, where we actually gave them take home quizzes or take home tests, open book. And so our assessment strategies will now have to evolve as well with the modality that we opt for. So some similarities between the online and classroom, and these will remain the same. Where's my thing? Oh, goodness. Okay, so course content will be similar for online and classroom. And I know that at tertiary, we're not forced to share our lesson plans as we do in secondary. So, but the course content will remain the same. We have objectives to meet. Students have to read textbooks, because I think a lot of teachers believe that because it's online, you don't need the textbook anymore, but if you have textbook, you still need to insist on the students reading, and it has to tie into what you're delivering online. The instructor role in both environments is not only is it important, it's actually very crucial for the delivery of both modalities. You as a teacher have to be available to answer the students' questions. You have to provide resources. And I think we find ourselves right now, because of the online environment and the teachers are so overwhelmed in delivery, they send the students to look for the resources, and that requires more time from the students. And we still have to remind students about dates. So it is best for you to create a page, a web page, or some format, a Google Doc, that helps to remind students about dates. They still need that. And just as you do in the classroom, you'd write important dates on the chalkboard or type it up and send it in an email, right? And then you still need to grade their schoolwork in these environments. So you have to check on progress. We have to find ways to consider their milestones and achievement. And most definitely, more so than in the classroom, you need to provide feedback for students in the online environment. And I cannot stress on that. The feedback is very important, and engaging the students. So now I see a lot of teachers delivering online, and they say, put on your camera, I need to see you. And I'm trying to think, where in creations do these teachers believe in their hearts that if all cameras are on, how can you even pay attention to that if you have 30 plus students? And not only that, it kills the bandwidth that we're already struggling with. So you have to come up with methods that will engage the students that does not require them having on their camera. And I'll tell you, I know for a fact my daughter is at a private institution in the US, and there's the same requirement, but because the teachers were not prepared for online education, that's what a teacher who is trained to do it face to face, that is what makes them comfortable, and that is what they use. They want to see the camera on, and now they're even so strict and rigorous. Don't do the class in your bedroom, don't do, and we really don't know what environment these students are living. In Belize, it could be a big family with 1 or 2 bedroom, 1 bath. There's not space for you to identify to be in a corner by yourself when you have a household with 8 children. Where is the reality in that? So we really need to look at that. And then the comparison between classroom and online. Online, as you know, there is no physical classroom, but in the classroom you have that. For lectures, it is really hard. I think teachers are still keeping the same schedule where they want to teach 4 or 5 classes for the entire day to these students. That is not sustainable in the online environment. You will have to come up with more methods, better methods of delivery, right? Our university, as I shared with others, we use a system where you have Blackboard Collaborate sessions at specific designated time, and that's when the student meet. We're a university that is global and regional, so there are time zones and time differences. So the students meet, and those are scheduled times. They're not, and then you have discussion boards and different things how to do it. Right now, a lot of teachers are insisting on if it's a 75-minute lecture, 75 minutes use it, and then you're really burning out yourselves, right? Then in the online, there is a necessity for group interaction, but we don't necessarily see that need in the classroom. Students get to raise their hands and speak in the online environment. You have an opportunity using the discussion board that all students are engaged and all students have to participate. And then there's option for individualized teaching and the use of different resources, right? So that's the comparative between both. So now I want to go into some strategies that I must share with you about, which is the hallmark of my session. What is very important in these strategies is that you create and maintain a strong presence. And I suggest you start off your session by sending the students a message. I find for me, a video works best, but I know a lot of teachers are trying to familiarize themselves with the platform. But that video or that introduction brings students to a welcoming environment. And it says to them that we're in this together. And I don't think that you can do that more than in a nice, warm message or a video to the students. And in your sessions, you want to get students to start talking and engaging. And I know a lot of teachers will say, well, I know my student, I know which one will talk. But remember, you now have them in the online environment and you want inclusion. You want to be able to include them. You're not, even if you have on the camera, I don't know that you're really seeing them as you want to when they're in person, and you can walk that classroom and interact and talk and get responses. So it's a challenge, and now you're going to have to try to do that in the online environment. And you also want to get students to contribute to the discussions and questions. So what you want to do is to create that environment that allows them to ask questions regularly. They're not afraid. They can anticipate open responses for their questions from you. So you have to create that environment. And that strategy we refer to as a strong presence that you've created for students. It also requires that sometimes you need that thumbs up, and thank goodness if you're using A lot of the platforms allows for emojis. You can give the students some type of reaction, and they relate very well to these because they're used to it. This is their world, this is their forte. They're not used to being online doing educational things, but they understand the use of emojis. So you can begin to use nonverbal communications that really lets them feel like they're in an environment that you can relate to them. I suggest too that and remember my presentation speaks primarily to tertiary, that you create a profile about yourself. The last lecturer who shared of her 30 years experience, I think you're now in an environment where you, as you say, you have a new cohort of students that you've never met face to face. So you want to give them information about you, your personality traits, so that you can build on your years of teaching experience and the students feel welcome in your class. And most importantly, your interaction with students helps to maintain a strong presence there. The next strategy is to establish a sense of comfort. You can only do this if you yourself feels extremely comfortable in the environment. So you have to familiarize yourself with technology. So I say to teachers, start to look at opportunities where you create a community of learners. Those teachers who are involved in teacher education, you clearly understand where I'm coming from. But now other teachers who are just teaching students to go in the business, science, or what social science field, you also have to create a community of learners now. And that is crucial for this online learning. Within this sense of comfort, I suggest to you, you humanize yourself. Let people feel that you're human, because right now we're all considered, we're out there. The students may have met you in person, but imagine you have a first entrant into the tertiary education. They don't know you. So you have to share your story, share about you, and so they feel really human, that you've humanized yourself for them. And I want to dare you to start to pose questions to students, questions that empowers the students to question each other and elicit rich discussions. I think oftentimes we find ourselves sticking to just asking questions that require yes, no responses because we don't want to. But now in this online environment, we want to nurture students. Don't only question you as the instructor, but they begin to question themselves, and then they form a discussion. And the best way you can do that is to do your discussion boards where you do not confine the students only to regurgitating what they found in the text. They actually use what they practice at their jobs or what their experiences, and they bring that to the discussion, and you get to monitor that. And I'll tell you, the greatest pride I feel is when I read discussion boards. I've set the guidelines for discussion, always ensuring that there is a lot of respect for each other's responses, and nobody gets to say your answer is wrong and all that, but that you prod others to think outside the box and to present answers. So there is where you establish a sense of comfort and the students feel like they want to be a part of your course. There's also under sense of comfort that you establish. When you respond to the community. You don't individualize your response for those type of questions because it cripples the creativity and innovation of the students, and they will withdraw from responding because they won't feel as comfortable responding, especially if they feel like the response, your feedback you give them is more damning than encouraging, right? So, and the same thing, you want to encourage the students to share about themselves. So create a space for them to share about themselves. I usually on my page, I have a section where I call coffee break room, and it allows for them to go in there and talk whatever questions they have. In my mind, I don't think there's ever a stupid question from a student because we're learning, right? And so There are different rooms, different boards that I create that allows them to express themselves. And in teaching, you have to demonstrate excitement and enthusiasm about teaching the course. Even if you've been teaching it for 30 years and you've lost your zest, and you no longer, whenever I am delivering, I pour myself into the delivery. I prepare. I knew I was going to do this session. For only 45 minutes, you wouldn't believe how much preparation and how it stays on my mind, because I wanted to come over that I am confident and I'm comfortable with the topic, right? But once you encourage them through your own enthusiasm and excitement, you will notice that you slowly alleviate the fear of the student. They don't have to get anxious about coming to your class, and then they don't isolate themselves. So I want to encourage you to do that as one of the strategies. Now, for feedback, it's another strategy that a lot of teachers find stress. If you have 6 classes that you must deliver to different students, you will have a strain on delivering feedback. So, and that is why I recommend that most of your feedback, try to reserve that, try to identify how you can do that to the community of students as opposed to individual. There are other opportunities where you will have to respond to them individually, but try to think about it in a reasonable format, because if you have 6 classes, multiply that by 30 students in each class, you have a lot of responses that you must do. So when you're responding, be very mindful of interpretation. I cannot stress on that. Please remember, this environment, as easy as it may be for you, it may not be easy for the students. Even if you are not experiencing difficulties or you are experiencing, multiply that 10-fold by what the student is experiencing at this time, right? So the reality is you have to be mindful of in misinterpretation. And then you can make your corrections as you feel the need. And remember, always assess the learner's comprehension of material. And that's why earlier I indicated that there's a separate session on assessment and measurement for online learning, and that may be an area you want to consider for training, right? I'm sorry, I see the chat, but I also have on my timer because of the time, so I'm sorry, I'll try to answer those shortly. And then I want you to also consider frequent and effective communication with students. You could do this through a variety of ways. I've identified some that are low-hanging fruits. Answer your emails, check the discussion boards that you've created, and every opportunity you have, use that as an opportunity to give students feedback. That is crucial in the online environment. In the face-to-face, you had an opportunity. If you give a test this week, you have till next week to check it, and then the students already know your pattern. They know that if you gave the test Thursday, next Thursday or 2 weeks after Thursday, you'll give back the graded test, right? But in the online environment, students require feedback, some level of feedback, and they will ask you, they will put you to the test, right? So you have to look at that as well. Student success. You need, as an instructor, there has to be a great level of commitment from you to student success. You can notice very early on if students are failing or they're not understanding. You have an opportunity to provide help, and you notice that I insisted on a community of learners, because you can also lean on students within the sessions to assist others as well. You can identify that. So that's not very hard, very difficult, but the system that we currently employ in our schools, remember, it was just because of the COVID situation. As it evolves, we will start to see institutions develop help desk. My university has a 24/7 help desk, but students also understand that they will hear a response within 48 hours. Even though we're 24/7, we have to service thousands of students, so that's an understanding. There's opportunity, you will start to see opportunities for tutoring online, and then you'll definitely see the evolution of student services coordinator at the various institutions. So roles will change, but for now, you are that person with multiple hats as the instructor. You have multiple hats to serve, but as we go along, we'll see an evolution of these roles. For effective online learning, there are 3 key things that I want to highlight. You have to know your technology, familiarize yourself with the platform, know it. I get the opportunity to listen to teachers tell students, I don't know you can do this, I don't know if you can do this. And the students will navigate those technology, the platform that you're using, and they'll learn it better than you and use it against you. So you want to familiarize yourself with your platform, get familiar with it, spend time in engaging and figuring out your way around the technology. Expect the unexpected. Some point in time, technology will fail you. Get up in the morning, BTL decide no internet. Don't rely too much on the technology because it'll fail you. And so have a backup plan on how you will move the students along in their educational path without technology, because it can fail you. And then set expectations. At the start of your course, you need clear expectation, how you will manage the duration of the course, how students will interact, and how they engage. One of the things that is very crucial in online learning is your content. When you develop your content, because you have to do it, maybe you decided to do it by weeks, by modules, the internet is so dynamic, you have to go back and check your links, check your resources, check your modules. I know a lot of people are using Google Docs and stuff. You have to make sure you save those documents in the cloud or wherever, but don't, because once you tell students go to that link and the link is, one student find out the link is not there and nobody will do their work. They will come back to you, Miss, but you gave us a link and it's not there, and cause chaos. So you have to constantly go back and check your content. Be available to the student if when they're navigating, they have difficulties. And I'll tell you one thing that I tell myself when I'm doing online. If I have a challenge finding the link or the resource, why would I think the student won't have that challenge? So if you experience challenge, then you need to find a better resource or download the resource and make it available. Because if you found it challenging to find it, then it's the same. And the same, it works in the reverse. If you're using a test or a project or something that you found online, the students will find it too and find the answers to it, right? And then the online students, how you help them to succeed. There's so much opportunity for you to provide resources, tutorials, give them opportunities to do practice quizzes. But in all of this, you want to encourage your students to find which learning modality works best for them. And right now, what is most crucial for us and for the students, time management and how they prioritize. And I want to encourage you to find time in your busy schedule to help students to organize their time and to appreciate the opportunity to independently study. The students need a lot of push because they're so used to that face-to-face. They like to be in that environment. And this environment forces us, whether we want to or not, to do a lot of stuff individually and independently. So the students will have to be familiar with that. So I want to thank you for your for joining me in this presentation. I will look in the chat, but at the same time, I will give back the floor to the moderator so that you can field your questions. But I'll pull up the chat because I saw it blazing.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Saunders, for that splendid presentation. We can do 3 minutes of question and answer. I am going to ask you all to, I know that we have the chat is very, very active. However, if you want, you can post your questions there, or also raise your hand and then you unmute your mic and then you can ask your question.
Yes, and I have the chat open so I can quickly read.
All right, Vanessa Tun, go ahead.
Well, I am a student, and as a student, I honestly saw that Dr. Saunders actually put a lot of effort and time in her presentation, and she really reached some really valid points. And I've went through that struggle before, and I would really like to thank her to actually think as a student's point of view and not only a teacher's point of view. And I really enjoyed the presentation. It was just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear from a student's perspective. And you know what is so positive about it? I mentioned to you that I started off as a student doing online, and I loved it so much. When I returned home, I started to teach online as well. So, you know, you're a student now, but eventually in your area, you may find a way to teach, and your experience, if it's very positive, it will make you a better practitioner.
Okay. Dr. Saunders, I think we have Javier Castellanos on the chat asking something about forums, but I didn't really.
Okay, I didn't hear the question, Javier. Do you want to clarify? Yes, I just see you say forums with a question mark, but small chunks of information. I'm not sure.
Okay, what happened is this morning. My name is Hector Castellanos, and what happened is that many times we ignore the most simplest things as to get feedback from students. For example, forums. Forums can go very, very far in getting a feedback from the students by having a small forum after a small presentation. And the small presentation can be small chunks of information as in the form of a video or on the topic that you are covering. Not a long video, but a short one, and then you evaluate that by getting feedback from the students through the means of forums, and that they can collaborate. In that aspect, you can then evaluate and see how well you cover the content, and that is what we do in the classroom. In a face-to-face, you teach a content, and as you go along, you see how well they understood the material. The content online not necessarily have to be set and expect the students that they will master everything 100%. You have to go and evaluate it, and I believe by using forums, you get a feedback of how the student feels. And at the same time, when creating these assessments or these videos, you need to look at it from the student's perspective. Will they get everything that they need to get? And do they have the previous knowledge, what they need before they start that particular video? And so in that forum, you can have that feedback from the students. Would you agree on that?
Yes, I am certainly advocating for multiple methods of delivery, and there's no one method. I'll tell you, the students' experience can be enriched when you use multiple methods. And students are just like us. They will find what works, what they like best, and they stick to it. The same with instructors. If these instructors are already used to testing knowledge based on a quiz or a test, they're not willing to explore the forums per se, Javier, but it's a method of eliciting rich discussion from the students. And it's not a testing where you actually have to grade the discussion, but there's an opportunity to grade it as well. But it will also test the students' knowledge of the material. As you rightfully said, let's say, for instance, you have a video, you have them look at the video, and then you want to engage them in the discussion to know what they gathered from it. That's the best way of getting that. In other instances, teachers will teach the material and then you test them by giving them a quiz. And that's the only method they know. So I strongly suggest somebody type in video critique. That is another way. There is so many ways to assess student knowledge in the online environment. Does not require the traditional paper-based, now translated into online exams and quizzes. There are many, many ways to elicit a discussion from them, and at the same time test their knowledge on what you have taught.
Dr. Saunders?
Yes.
Hello, this is Dr. Hodge. I want to commend you on an excellent, informative presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge.
Yes, I have a question. Somewhere you mentioned that you should be ready if technology fails. I was wondering if you would comment a bit on backup alternatives when you have technology problems.
Yes, and a lot of the software that we're using to deliver online education allows for offline posting, and then when you come back online you have. But my recommendation was, I know right at this point a lot of teachers struggle with sending ahead their presentation or their lectures to the students before they deliver it. My recommendation is that you upload those, and in every training that I do, I encourage teachers to do 2 or 3 weeks of advanced preparation for the online modality, and just give the students access to those, because we have students at different levels there are students who learn quickly and they have time to go and read. So if you have already uploaded it, the students had an opportunity to download and have it stored. If your system goes down or their system is down, they will already have access to that information. That's my backup plan. That's how I deliver when I do online. My lectures are always prepared well in advance, and I don't go week by week. In fact, in most times my semester is 13 weeks. When I start a course, my entire 13 weeks of information is already uploaded to the website, and then I just select when those become available to the students. And you keep replenishing, updating and fine tuning. But of course, I have the luxury of selecting how many courses I teach, because I'm an administrator, not a teacher. And I know that I know who the audience I am speaking to, so I know that they don't have that luxury. But I think the best way is to ensure that you have the information readily available to students, so that if they're offline, they already have access to that information, and when the system is down. Right now we have had very little downtime in the country, but when we have downtime, it impacts the entire country, and we can't take that risk that the only method for online learning is that when the students log on, you're there. There will be a day when you get up and you try log on and you can't do that. I think when the school started, we had that, the system had crashed. Nobody had internet. So that's my recommendation.
Yes, just one more thing, and that is, as you know, I think virtually all universities, not only in the US, but around the world, have posted on their website different best practices for teaching online.
Okay.
I would just suggest or recommend to our listeners that perhaps they just want to search for best practices for online learning and teaching.
I just copied it, and I will check them out. Thank you for that. I'll copy it and do it at a later time. I'm really appreciative.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Saunders,
yes.
I think we have exhausted our time. I want to publicly thank you very much for such a splendid presentation. I know for something of this nature, we require much more time because the discussion is healthy. And I am reading the comments here, and I can tell that our teachers and participants were very much in tune, and I really appreciate that you accepted to be a part of this conference with us. Thank you very much. And
okay, I'm putting my email. If people have questions offline, I'll try my best to respond to you at earliest. You can email me at that email. And then I put my phone number. If you prefer the WhatsApp method, just send me a line and then I will respond to you there as well.